Hey guys, my name's Ed Schaller, and I'll be giving my presentation on organizational effectiveness. So I'd like to really start by defining, what organizational effectiveness really is. It's really just the way a company intends to complete their tasks, their objectives, through things like leadership, structure, those, things of that nature. It's kind of a broad topic, so when I was doing a lot of my research on the thing, there's a lot of different models that scholars have talked about. It's really no one size fits all kind of fix, but again, I'm really focusing on the goal model. So again, it's here's our goal as a company. How are we going to achieve that? What are we going to put in place in order to achieve that? What systems do we have? What people do we have? And that kind of segues into my next point here: the right people in the right roles. So, it really comes from the top down, but it is affected on every single, level of the company. So, you got to have the right people as founders, as executives, all the way down to management, local management, and then employees as well. Partners, within your business also factor in there. But really, right people in the right roles is a key in order for an organization to actually be effective. Okay, so now that we've kind of defined what organizational effectiveness is, we're going to really touch on the steps here. So, as you can obviously read, you got leadership, communication, accountability, delivery, performance, and measurement. So, starting off with leadership, briefly talked about it, but you need a strong leader, with a vision, an idea. This is what we want to produce, or this is what our mission statement is. How are we going to achieve this mission statement? So when leadership finally figures out what they want to do, you get into the next step of communication here. So this may be one of the more important steps. Leadership has their goal, their mission in mind. How do we communicate this to the public? How do we communicate this to our employees, our partners? What are we going to do in order to get our message out there? So that's an important step, in the process. Then it gets us to accountability. So it's great if we have an idea what we want to do, we tell everyone about it. But if we're not accountable, we don't actually do anything to solve it. What's the point? Nothing gets done. We just kind of push everything off on other people, or it's not my fault. I don't know why this happened, so nothing gets done. So then after that comes delivery. So you actually have to, basically put your money where your mouth is at that point. We say we're going to design shoes, for an example. We actually have to create the shoes, deliver them to our partners, deliver them to our consumers, get them out there. Performance. We don't want to have, a poor product, a poor mission. You want to be judged on the quality of your work. So performance is a big factor here in the steps. If your performance isn't very good, people really aren't going to trust you. They're not going to buy from you. They're not going to believe in you. So again, the organization kind of crumbles, from the outside if your performance tends to lag. And then measurement. You have to be able to kind of, like, to use the word in the definition, but measure, your progress or your achievement. It kind of goes back to the SMART process we had talked about earlier in the year. You need to have a measurable kind of, I guess, functionality within your organization here. This way you can kind of look over, the years, over quarters, whatever you kind of want to compare to. This way, hey, we did this much production in quarter one. How can we improve on that and get to more production in quarter four, for example? So how does a firm achieve effectiveness? The firm's going to have to adapt, over time, especially to external forces. So really, for long-term sales goals, retention of employees, the firm is going to have to adapt in order to stay effective and basically to stay alive. Human capital is another important piece of it. Again, it kind of goes back to right people in the right role. Really, it's just keeping your employees motivated, and do we empower them in order to basically be effective and achieve the goals of the company. I briefly touched on it just there as motivation. So how does leadership motivate their employees? Every person has different motivations. How do we get the best out of everyone? What techniques do we want to do in order to motivate people? And empowerment. So are we going to have a strict, rigid structure within the firm? You do this, 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 and this, and that's how we do it? Or are we going to be a little hands-off, empower our employees to make decisions? This way, they're more effective. So now I'd like to talk about firm structure in order to achieve some sort of effectiveness. So you have decentralized decision making versus centralized decision making. So decentralized is really when you kind of empower local firms in order to make any kind of decisions. You empower employees to make decisions themselves versus centralized where everything comes from the top. So these are our policies, these are our procedures, this is what you do, and this is how you do it. So it really becomes a balance between how much do we empower the employees versus what we actually want them to do in order to carry out our tasks. Then there's also formalization and empowerment. So formalization it's similar to centralized decision making, where you kind of formalize your effectiveness or what you want your firm to do. So again, that kind of stifles empowerment, but it also makes employees a lot more predictable. This way, if you want to keep them on a rigid kind of structure, you can, and they're not going to do anything that's out of the ordinary or may screw up any sort of production. But really, the message here is that all these kind of structures, they kind of coexist with one another, and there's really no one technique that's best. It's really finding a balance between, what structure works best at each firm or at each, organization, and really just kind of figuring out really the correct blend in order to have an organization be effective. And finally, I'd like to talk about firm culture. So, firm culture is shared values, within the organization. So, some studies have actually shown that a firm culture actually gives certain organizations a comparative advantage over others, just because their employees they tend to believe more in the company. Everyone's on the same page, and they're really working towards their value statement, towards their mission statement. So, a lot of times you have two companies doing the same kind of thing, the culture is really what separates them in order to be more effective or be the better organization. So how does this firm culture form? Really, it forms in the infancy most times of a company. So it really comes from the founders and what their mission is and how they want to achieve this. So they kind of put this culture forward, and when they onboard employees, when they bring employees on, or when employees are just there for a certain amount of time, it starts to get somewhat ingrained in them, and they just kind of adapt and become part of this culture. And if it's a strong culture, it exists, it lasts as the founders leave or as employees leave, but really the company becomes known for the culture. But really, that's the gist of my presentation. Any questions, feel free to post them down below, and I will happily answer them. Thanks.